Welcome back to the channel. This is Wes, and I'm sure you've heard the news out there that apparently Daredevil is going to be in the She-Hulk series on Disney Plus, and that has a lot of people worried, specifically because the creative lead on the series is talking about what she wants to do with Daredevil, and it doesn't exactly fit in line with the tone of Daredevil from the comic books, or even from the Netflix series, which everyone was really excited about. We're finally going to see Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock in the MCU. Obviously, we got the little cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home. And that movie really laid out the blueprint how Disney can incorporate some of these characters that not only that they got from Fox when they did the Fox deal, you got the X-Men, you got the Fantastic Four, but the other Marvel characters that they got from the Netflix universe into the MCU itself proper by honoring the characters and their stories and really giving authentic representations of those characters. I think rightly so, people are worried, especially after seeing Wilson Fisk in Hawkeye. Wasn't exactly the best interpretation. Still a good performance by Vincent D'Onofrio, but not exactly the best representation. The information I'm going to talk about here and the quotes that I have are taken from an article in the Direct. They had an interview with the creative lead of the series, and this is what they had to say. Daredevil fans have been clamoring about Matt Murdock ever since his reemergence in the MCU in Spider-Man No Way Home. Of all the fresh ideas She-Hulk Attorney at Law is poised to bring to the MCU, one of the most interesting is the decision to dive into the superhuman legal world using a less serious tone than Daredevil. From what we've seen so far from the She-Hulk Attorney at Law series, just as far as the trailers and whatnot, it does appear basically to be a parody of Law and Order, stuff like that. Not really a true superhero show, although there will be superheroics. I mean, there's got to be. It's part of the MCU. But it seems like that's the tone they're trying to set. And I kind of understand why you would bring in a character like Matt Murdock, Daredevil, into this show. First off, he's well-known, highly regarded. People like Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock. He's a lawyer, so it kind of fits into the motif here. The problem is the character of Matt Murdock and Daredevil isn't exactly lighthearted. It's much more dour. He's kind of a serious character. A lot of bad things happen to him. He's a vigilante patrolling the streets at night of Hell's Kitchen and kind of protecting people. And he has a lot of really disgusting, just evil villains always after him. So Daredevil, in and of himself, just the way he's portrayed, isn't exactly the most lighthearted character in the world, while that's certainly the tone they're going for within She-Hulk Attorney at Law. So the cameo makes sense. We'll see how it goes. But with the information that we do have regarding what they want to do with Daredevil, it has a lot of people, including myself, very apprehensive, as specifically about Daredevil's characterization in She-Hulk. The series creator and head writer Pamela Gao said, "It was so fun to be able to do, and we do this with every character cameo from the MCU, is we take them from the environment that you know them from, which is a much more dramatic and action-oriented role, much more on the serious side, and we bring them into our world, and they get to play in the tone of She-Hulk, and they got to explore, and we get to see a lighter side of that character." If you're bringing the character in for a cameo, obviously it's there to serve the main purpose of the series itself. It's not really there to serve Daredevil. It's there to serve She-Hulk. But you don't want to destroy the character of Daredevil, Matt Murdock, who's immensely popular from this series on Netflix and some of the best comic book runs of all times, by downplaying him to the level of Jen Walters in the She-Hulk show. He really should be like a juxtaposition. He should be someone that comes in with a completely different tone and flavor that's all of his own and plays off the main series and characters for comedic effect. And certainly we've seen Matt Murdock and even Daredevil in the Netflix show had some one-liners and certainly had some moments of levity that you really needed in a show like that, because it was so dramatic, it was so gritty, really groundbreaking stuff, and really set the bar so high when it came to superhero streaming shows, like right off the bat. I don't think we've ever really achieved that again. I don't think bringing this character in for what will likely be his first meaningful airtime on an MCU program, he wasn't in Spider-Man No Way Home all that long. I imagine he's going to have some lines and a bigger role to play here, and then portraying the character completely different than we've seen him in the past, that really got the character so popular and what people have been clamoring for when Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock was teased to come into the MCU. People are excited for this. You don't want to blow away and destroy their expectations on your first go around. Obviously, what they did with Spider-Man No Way Home did not do that. If anything, it kind of got people more excited because they thought they did a really good job. Obviously, they did a good job with the other Spider-Man characters as well. But when you look at Wilson Fisk in that Hawkeye series, Wilson Fisk, yes, it was still a good performance, but they pretty much cut the balls off the character almost immediately. The final battle scene he has there, he's defeated pretty easily And Wilson Fisk that we saw from the Netflix universe, like he was smashing people's heads in with doors, and he was the biggest threat you could ever imagine. And I don't think taking these characters down a level and playing them for laughs is a good way to go with it. We do have a few more bits of information from this article on the Direct. The Direct's Pamela Gores also asked Jessica Gao how Charlie Cox's Daredevil even ended up in She-Hulk in the first place. She said, well, first of all, we were shocked that we were able to use him. Like when we first heard that he was on the table, we couldn't believe it. We kept thinking like, okay, at some point, someone's going to say, just kidding, like it's a cruel joke, and you actually can't have him. And it just kept going and kept going. I think Pamela had a pretty good read on herself and the series that she was creating, that Daredevil, while a big star and a cameo in this series would certainly help get the word out about She-Hulk and create interest in it, probably wasn't going to serve Daredevil, the character, all that well moving forward in the MCU. Disney probably should have stuck with Pamela's initial gut instincts and said, maybe this isn't the right place for that. Because we also know we're going to see Daredevil in another Disney Plus show, which I think is going to be very difficult, keeping interest in Daredevil Matt Murdock until we get this Daredevil Born Again series. Echo, the next project Daredevil appears in, will possibly offer a space to dip back into the darkness, with the series focusing on the titular character's violent past. Rumors have already suggested that not only will Daredevil be a significant part of the show, but also that he will be back in a red and black costume to boot. If you're a comic book reader, you know that Echo and Wilson Fisk have a past. They are interlinked within the Marvel Comics universe, and they are incorporating that and kind of building on it within the MCU on Disney+. But I think the decision to even have an Echo series is just baffling. That actress, and I understand, I guess she really is handicapped, just like the character on the show, but she is a charisma vacuum. That was the most boring character I've ever seen in a superhero show. I don't think that she could carry a 5-second commercial, let alone a 6 or 8 episode like miniseries on Disney Plus. That character and what was built there within Hawkeye just isn't enough to warrant a show. I understand, at least from what I've been told, that Daredevil and Kingpin are more like the stars, and Echo's kind of like a side player in that one. But just calling it Echo and having Daredevil play such a big role in this series, it's probably not going to go over very well, especially now that people are starting to hear that there might be changes as far as the tone and the characterization, the way that they're presenting Matt Murdock Daredevil within the MCU. You don't want that kind of stink of failure sitting all over these wonderful characters that have been really successful in the past, specifically Charlie Cox as Daredevil, Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, which really should have been huge additions to the MCU itself. And it feels like they're wasting them on these D and F-list characters that no one cares about. If you watch Hawkeye, the least interesting character in there is Echo. I don't know why they have this show even coming out. And then, She-Hulk is a cool character, and if it's done right, it's going to be fun. But it doesn't even look like it's really a superhero show. It's a Law and Order parody show. I just think they're going about introducing Matt Murdock and kind of wasting the cachet that Matt Murdock, Charlie Cox, Daredevil have in coming into the MCU, and they're kind of wasting it on all these characters that were always destined to probably fail anyway. At this point, I just don't trust Marvel Studios and Disney Plus and Kevin Feige to really be able to successfully introduce very many strong female characters into the MCU. They haven't done a really good job with that since like Black Widow and maybe Scarlet Witch. Everything else feels like it's been failure. And I think this is an enormous waste of the potential of Matt Murdock in the MCU. The Direct's article finishes saying, from Gal's comments, it seems that She-Hulk's less serious approach won't necessarily extend into the tone of Daredevil Born Again, though it will introduce a slightly lighter take on the vigilante. For fans sincerely worried about Daredevil's characterization in the MCU, it seems She-Hulk is the place to turn for a better sense of the character's future. Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios made a pretty good move introducing the Charlie Cox Matt Murdock character into the MCU using the Spider-Man movie. It was a $1 billion success. Everyone saw that thing. It's well over $1 billion. I don't want to sell it short. I think it was like $1.8 billion, I believe. I think that was a really good start for the character. Just a little cameo in here. But I hate seeing them kind of waste a character away so we can make humorous appearances, trying to get over characters that just aren't meant to be anything important or big with the MCU itself. We'll see what happens with Daredevil Born Again. Sounds like that's not really going to be the born again story. Maybe they're just using the title to say this is Daredevil being born again into the MCU, a different approach, a different take. Not the R-rated Daredevil we're used to. It's going to be toned down for the MCU and Disney Plus itself. 18 episodes is a very big run. That's the biggest streaming show Disney Plus and the MCU have committed to this far. So obviously they do think there's a big future for Daredevil in the MCU. Will people be excited about it? Will they accept it? I'm not really sure. Disney Plus, the MCU, Kevin Feige are having a hell of a time getting She-Hulk over. The bad CGI certainly doesn't help, but the comments from the director and the actors aren't helping either. Basically blaming the fans for bad CGI and just really gaslighting, strawmanning people over what are legitimate criticisms. Definitely check this out for a more in-depth take on She-Hulk.